Now, understand, this matters to people everywhere. One nuclear weapon exploded in one city, be it New York or Moscow, Islamabad or Mumbai, Tokyo or Tel Aviv, Paris or Prague, could kill hundreds of thousands of people. And no matter where it happens, there is no end to what the consequences might be.
The consequences that President Obama is talking about are very real in a world filled with nuclear weapons. Our biggest instrument to prevent a nuclear catastrophe is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. With 187 countries that have signed it, the Non-Proliferation Treaty is one of the world's largest treaties. It all started about 50 years ago. A global problem in the 1960s was that of nuclear weapons. Because of an arms race between US and Russia, by 1961 there were enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world. There began to be more international awareness of the danger of uncontrolled nuclear weapon production. The US was very concerned that too many countries will acquire nuclear weapons, as is clearly evident in the declassified CIA document from April of 1966. With the US and the Soviet Union taking the lead, the Non-Proliferation Treaty emerged.
The Non-Proliferation Treaty was really a product of US-Soviet cooperation. Cold War, they disagreed on everything. We had thousands of nuclear weapons, but the two superpowers agreed on the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
In November of 1965, the General Assembly accepted a resolution which held the three pillars upon which the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was to be based. The three pillars were nuclear non-proliferation, peaceful nuclear cooperation, and nuclear disarmament. Despite the widespread belief that joining the treaty would make importing nuclear technology easier, some countries did not immediately join the treaty. In March of 1970, the NPT came into force. This was the beginning of much debate. When the NPT came into play in 1970, there were 5 known nuclear countries: the United States of America, the Soviet Union, now Russia, Britain, France, and China. The key tenets of the NPT were: the countries that had nuclear weapons were bound not to help other countries obtain them; the non-nuclear signatories agreed not to seek to develop or acquire such weapons; they were given an undertaking that they would be helped to develop nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. To keep the treaty updated and make sure that it was reinforced, every 5 years an NPT review conference was held. The first NPT review conference was held in 1975, and there was a lot of debate. The United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, and most other Eastern and Western Bloc countries felt that the treaty needed to be more universal and have stronger safeguards. On the other hand, the non-nuclear weapon states said that all the emphasis was being put on their obligations to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The two sides debated about whether there was significant progress towards the implementation of Article 6, which was nuclear disarmament. Despite these issues, all the countries that were signatories of the treaty agreed on a final declaration. This declaration acknowledged the strong support of the parties for the treaty. At this point, China was a nuclear country and had still not joined the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The story of China joining the NPT was a case study in debate and diplomacy and a success for the NPT. From the beginning, China was not a signatory. China claimed that the treaty was a conspiracy concocted by the USSR and the US to maintain their nuclear monopoly. During the 1980s, China's perspective on the NPT started to change. While Beijing criticized the NPT as an imbalanced and discriminatory treaty, it also indicated that it accepted the general idea of nuclear non-proliferation. In 1984, China became a member of the IAEA. When, in 1990, China attended the 4th NPT Review Conference, they reclaimed their complaints. But China also stated that the treaty was helping maintain world peace. Finally, China acceded to the treaty in March of 1992. It was the last nuclear country to do so. This was a huge success for the NPT.
The Chinese government is rather opaque how it makes decisions. Once they get nuclear weapons, it really isn't in their interest to see other countries get them.
On the other hand, the NPT is often thought of as a failure because Israel, India, and Pakistan never signed the NPT. All three have or are suspected to have nuclear weapons. India has very strongly opposed the NPT.
Humanity shares. We would love to see all nuclear weapons abolished from the face of this earth. Unfortunately, that is not the case. It is not immediately in prospect. As long as some countries possess nuclear weapons, we are not prepared to be supportive of a discriminatory treaty that says some countries can have something and others cannot.
First of all, it's an unequal treaty in that 5 states are allowed to have nuclear weapons under the treaty, and the others agree not to have them. I don't think that means the others are disadvantaged. The others derive an advantage because their neighbors can't have them either.
The other more gray example of potential failure is the case of Iran. Iran assigned the NPT. Ironically, it was the U.S. that assisted Iran in setting up its first civilian nuclear energy program. The U.S. originally believed that Iran was a strong supporter of the NPT in the 1970s. An internal cable exchange in April of 1975 between the U.S. Embassy and then Secretary of State demonstrate the close cooperation of U.S. and Iran on nuclear technology. Things are very different today.
The IAEA is not entirely confident, doesn't have enough information to proclaim with confidence that Iran is not pursuing nuclear weapons.
Currently, there is a widespread belief that Iran is in vigorous pursuit of nuclear weapons. It is interesting that Iran is using the NPT to defend its nuclear program, as is evident in the letter sent to the President of the IAEA in September of 2003. There continues to be an ongoing debate on multiple areas over the last 3 decades. Points in contention during review conferences are disarmament, non-compliance of countries like Iraq and North Korea, nuclear terrorism, safeguards, and others. Issues like the safeguards have been persistent since the beginning of the treaty. On the other hand, there has been progress. One good example for support of the treaty was evident when it was agreed in 1995 that the treaty would be indefinitely extended by all 187 signatories. In 2010, many plans for nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, and peaceful nuclear energy were agreed upon.
So going into the 2010 NPT review conference, I think the 2 key issues were nuclear disarmament and achieving some sort of progress on the Middle East.
With respect to reducing the number of countries who would otherwise get nuclear weapons, I think the NPT has been a major success.
Almost universally, states have come to sign it and agree that they would forgo their right to obtain the most powerful weapon that humanity has developed. I think it makes the treaty a very valuable instrument, and indeed it is often called the cornerstone of international security.
75% of the countries that could have had nuclear weapons do not have them today because of the NPT. The other failure of the NPT has been countries like Libya, Iraq, Iran, and North Korea, where there have been attempts to use the NPT to get the nuclear technology and convert it to nuclear weapon programs.
4 cheaters out of 189 is not that bad of a record.
The Non-Proliferation Treaty has 187 signatories, of which 5 countries have nuclear power, and 182 are working towards using nuclear power for peaceful purposes. The Non-Proliferation Treaty has led several states to abandon their nuclear weapon programs and has minimized the proliferation. From the original 15 to 20 nuclear weapon states that President John F. Kennedy foresaw in the 1960s, we only have 8 today. The Non-Proliferation Treaty had many positive consequences. It is, however, not a perfect treaty. The disarmament objectives of the NPT have not been fulfilled. We are still a long way from that paradise where there are truly no nuclear weapons. Without the NPT, though, the world would be overflowing with nuclear weapons. A scenario that would place us far, far closer to a nuclear disaster for our planet.